Shalom, I'm Rabbi Jonathan Ginsburg. This video is about Judaism and vegetarianism, or holy eating. So what's the story? Is vegetarianism encouraged by Judaism? Some would say yes. Is it required? No. But what's the background about it? Well, first, in the Bible, Adam and Eve were vegetarians. 10 generations later, according to the Torah, Noah was given permission to eat meat after having been cooped up in the ark with all that flesh. But God specifically says you cannot eat blood. And the idea seems clearly that human beings should not be too comfortable with blood, because then we would shed blood. Then 10 generations after that, Abraham comes around, and he gets all kinds of extra restrictions that the Jewish people still have in the form of the dietary rules, including we can't just kill whatever we want, only certain things can be killed for eating, the blood has to be drained, the insides have to be checked for disease, the meat and milk are not able to be eaten together. You cannot hunt anything, you cannot trap anything. The only thing that you can eat is something that's killed humanely, quickly, by people who are trained to do so. Now, what does it mean about vegetarianism? Is there, having had permission to eat meat, is it something that we should or shouldn't do? Well, some Jews would say, especially on Shabbat and holidays, in order to be more appropriate and to be more dignified and to better honor God, we should have meat. But that may be something that reflects back on the many centuries when Jews couldn't afford to have meat, when very few people had meat, and it was a very huge luxury on the Sabbath. Today, however, people eat meat constantly, and fish and chicken, and so what's the story? Well, there's a concept in Judaism that's called Fnim Meshurat Hadin, which means kind of going above the law. The minimum is the law, but you can always seek a higher ground. And many would argue, as I do, that eating a mostly or all vegetarian diet would be in that category of going beyond the law for a necessary matter, or for a spiritually higher level of holier eating. Now, why is that? Well, first, it's important to note that the great Jewish mystics, by and large, were vegetarians, and many of them believed that animals had souls. And for people who have had a close experience with a beloved dog, for example, it might be possible to think that animals have souls. And certainly the difference between us and chimpanzees and porpoises and certain other animals is not that great. In fact, there was an interesting editorial before about some zoo being so excited that an elephant was able to recognize itself in a mirror. And then the editorial in the paper said, well, that's interesting, that we are happy that the elephant could pass our test, but how many tests the elephant would lodge could we pass? So there was a notion among at least the Jewish mystics that, and some of the great modern Jews, like Rav Kook of Israel before it became a state, that vegetarianism is a higher level of religious observance. But today there's even perhaps a more important reason for vegetarianism, and that is the environment. If you compare the amount of energy and resources it takes to make 1 pound of meat versus 1 pound of tofu, it's unbelievable. And so for people who cut back a little bit or a lot on meat consumption, you're really helping the environment and conserving energy. Not to mention the pocketbook. And so for those reasons, it seems to me that there's a definite meritorious value in keeping vegetarian. Now, there are even higher levels than that. For example, my wife is basically a vegetarian, but she says that when we buy eggs, we should only buy happy eggs, range-free eggs, eggs that where the chickens are able to be not fettered and kept in the bad system, but able to run free. Other people who eat only vegan foods, where they won't eat any foods that comes from an animal. And there are others still who will only eat things that grow on trees, like fruitarians. And then there are others who won't pick anything off a tree, but only eat things that are already on the ground. So there's always levels of people trying to preserve life in their various ways. But it comes down to the minimum, which is for a Jew keeping kosher, which has its own restrictions and disciplining ourselves and creating ethical eating and ethical lifestyle and a love of life, to a higher madrega, a higher level, which we would view as strict vegetarianism or liberal vegetarianism. Hope this helps clarify various issues related to Jewish eating and vegetarianism.